welcome to the latest edition of Rugby Unfolded. My name is Jan de Koning, and with me, Eugene Eloff.
Hi, Jan. Yes, great to talk. We'd like to go ahead and go forward with rugby, but I think this weekend that just passed was an important one in the history of rugby and the history between South Africa and Ireland. And I would like to hear your opinion on a few things. The one is Ireland's been seen as the team with the best discipline, clinical team, best game plans, everything in place. And here was actually, some people called it a chaotic match. But I call it a different match because things didn't go their way and things didn't go the way. And I want to ask you about Ireland's approach to the game and also the referee's handling of what I thought could get out of hand.
For me, the one thing I will start with a referee. So for once we had a referee, unlike the previous 2 weeks, we had a referee that actually blew the laws. And when we dominated, they got penalized. The referee weren't guessing. He didn't have some Italian shouting in the referee's ear all the time. An Italian team doctor that tried to pull players off the field with no concussion pings on mouth guards and stuff like that. So I just feel all the penalties, and I know the Irish, and I'll chat about the Irish crybabies just now, but I think that the Irish got done in by their own lack of discipline for once, and it happened against them in the New Zealand game as well. Unfortunately, once you dominate them, their forwards, and you break that rhythm, because they play a rhythm game, they keep the ball through phases. Once you dominate them at the breakdown, once you dominate them in the scrums, then their game falls apart because they're so predictable. They become so predictable, and that's the one thing. I mean, I don't know how you feel about the scrums and the liners and stuff, but I just think we were completely dominant. Even though the possession stats, I mean, the possession is roughly the same, around about 50%, but we had 60% of the territory, which says we played all the game or most of the game in their half, and they had to play on the back foot, and tactically they couldn't attack from deep all the time, and our defense was good enough.
Yes, Jan, that's true. I think one thing that one tends to forget is that that Ireland per se, if they're under the pump, their response is not good. And I think therefore, once they were under pressure, once their scrums were under pressure, their set phases was under pressure. And as you talk about, they play with rhythm. Once that was disrupted, because we did disrupt it, and it was not pretty to look at, but it was effective for us. I think once that happened, they felt the pressure and started doing silly things, and they got away with a lot of cynical actions. And to me, if you look at the history of Ireland, it was pure pressure that they had, and it also happened against New Zealand, and they got away. I mean, they should have got another yellow card when we got that penalty try, and I think the ref was tired giving cards, and he just sent them to the locker room for halftime. And to me, I think that was the turning point in the game. I've never seen the Irish have such bad game discipline.
The funniest part for me, Eugene, is they try to blame the referee, and they complain about the referee. They don't understand. If the referee keeps telling you, keep yourself up, and he keeps giving penalties for guys falling flat on their bellies, then surely at some stage the referee is going to get tight and start yellow carding you. That is as simple as it is. Don't give away penalties, don't fall flat, scrum properly, and that's where their problems started. They just don't have a proper scrum. The other thing is that and this is the funny part for me, is the Irish crybabies, their media and their supporters, now wants to blame poor Jacques Nienaber. Apparently Jacques Nienaber is the spy, just because he said one day, 4 years from now, maybe when his contract with Leinster runs up, he might return and rejoin Rassie. So now they say, no, it's Jacques' fault. He's just spying on them and he's taking all their secrets away. It's that kind of stuff. Instead of fixing their problems, getting depth in their props, because they don't have a proper scrum. Their lineouts is very limited. I mean, we've got Peter Steph-Tutoy, we've got Norkia, we've got Ergia, we've got Etzebeth, and when Luit is not banned, then he can play, or injured, then he can play. So our lineout options are so much deeper than theirs. Yet they complain about things that's got nothing to do with the Irish team in the game. what Jacques does at Leinster has absolutely zero to do with how bad the Irish are playing.
Jan, yeah, I think we must take them one on the chin. They don't like us, and they don't like the South Africans. It's not only Jacques who they blame, it's also Jean Klein and all the South Africans. Now they've got a problem with the Saffers playing there. So you know what? They need to do their homework. Since the Saffers were there, their rugby actually improved. And the interesting thing, I don't know, a lot of people know, most of the interviews they did off the time was with their 3 New Zealanders. And they, you know, we call it, I can't use the word now on this podcast, but shoveling this. They're passing the buck. They're passing the buck. And they're also a passionate rugby community, and I think this one was very, very difficult because they talked it up, and it did not really live up to the game. Everybody thought it's going to be this running game and this beautiful, attractive game. It was an ugly kicking game, contesting in the air, late hits. You know what? And the result is there. And I think bottom line is the lineouts have actually previously been very good, but we just neutralized it by our attacking of the lineouts as well.
Eugene, I've got something for you. They were shoveling horse manure.
That's a better word than the word I was thinking about, but I knew that it will not go well.
Yeah, you're right about one thing. I think for me, and I know sometimes stats is a dangerous thing. You play with stats, but I touched on the territory in that. But the ball in play, so they had the ball 285 times. We had the ball 227 times. Their ball was all in their own half. It doesn't, and that comes back to that. So their kicks, they kicked 29 times. We kicked 31 times. So what we did is kick better than they did. We didn't kick that much more than them. Our carries they had 120 carries. We only had 97 carries. But our carry meters were more than this. We had 562 carry meters, and they only had 503 carry meters with 23 more carries. That tells me everything we did were more effective than they. We kicked better, we carried better, we retained the ball better. And that comes back to what you said earlier about possession and discipline. You know, under pressure, they gave away 18 penalties. We gave away 13 penalties. By our standards is quite high because we seldom give away more than 10. But most of all, the penalties added up so quickly that while they had, the red card was a red card. There's nothing you can do. I mean, if you think of what our players were red carded for in previous games, this guy should have been a permanent red card immediately. And then they obviously had the 4 yellow cards, but the 4 yellow cards were for cynical things, continuously collapsing the scrums and stuff. So I think from that perspective, if you look at that game, this was probably one of Ireland's worst performances of the year, probably since the World Cup. I think since they lost in the quarterfinal of the World Cup, this Irish team has gone backwards. And I think that the bulk of this team is also getting on in years. People worry about the Springboks age bracket. I think this Irish team's age bracket is on the wrong side, and they are struggling because they've done, unlike Rassie, they're not bringing enough young quality players through.
Jan, before we go off this match, because I think we've done it now, I think there are two things that the humor that I found in this game is using these front rows of them were pretty much arrogant, like a sort of Bravehearts of Scotland attitude, and with their body language. And after the third scrum went down, I watched their facial expression. First of all, they were red in the face because of all the pressure that was on them. And now I want to also say, good scrumming is not the front row alone. It's the 2 guys behind them, and we scrum. Our flankers, 8th man, everybody scrum. That's why we put that much pressure on them. And last thing, we must give credit to our defense. We closed them down. They could not get ball on the front foot. So well done. It was a great win. We take the win and we move on.
Eugene, maybe now is a good time that we switch to the team or the dream team of the year that was announced today as well. And just for the sake of our readers, those who hadn't read it yet, I'll just run through it. This is World Rugby's dream team of the year. So let's get this straight. We don't necessarily agree with this, but this is Will Jordan at fullback, Cheslin Kolbe, Hugh Jones, Len Ikita, Louis Billy Barry, Sasha Feinberg Ngozulu, Cam Roygott, Harry Wilson, Tom Curry. I know you like to say something about Tom Curry. Peter Steph du Toit, Tag Byrne, Murray Itoje, Thomas du Toit, Malcolm Marx, and Oxen Che. I think let's quickly, Eugene, run through the backline and tell me, do you agree with that entire backline?
Jan, I don't agree with this whole team. I think the dream team, the people that picked this team, they are still dreaming. I would like to know who picked this team, what individuals, and what was the criteria. Because, for instance, they picked a guy like Hugh Jones that hasn't been playing. Hugh Jones is a phenomenal 13, but he hasn't been playing. So what was the criteria? Was it a guy playing in this series? Was it a guy that they've earmarked over the years? So, yeah, I've got a few problems. Itoje as a lock. Tim Curry, we can talk about now. And, you know, we are lucky to have so much guys. And I even think that a guy like Finn Russell can be very unlucky not to be part of that team. If you go look at the consistent performances he has put up. Sasha, his turn will come, but I've got a problem with quite a few players in the team, but I guess that's their dream team. But they've missed out on a few good players like Barrett. Etzebeth, I know he's not really on form, but Itoje is not better than Etzebeth currently. And Savia, where's Savia? Where's guys like that? Where's this little fullback of Italy that I thought had a wonderful season? So, this is a dream team for, I guess, a few media individuals or whoever picked a side.
Yeah, it is. They have a group of high-profile media guys that sit on a World Rugby Committee. They say in their release, World Rugby says in their release, it's a team for the year. So they took all sorts of games throughout the year, so over the whole year. To me, that's not necessary, but yeah, it's not the team at the moment. I selected a Springbok team earlier this week based on the last 3 games. So the France game, the Italy game, and the Ireland game. And on those things, my Springbok team differs from quite a bit from the others. So I want to touch on 2 things. Hugh Jones, I agree with you. I think Jesse Kriel is one of the most underrated players. He's, in my book, my view, by far the best number 13 in the world at the moment. At fly-off, Sasha is an extremely talented player. And I'll say it again, this is not a personal thing. I just don't think Sasha is playing such good rugby at the moment. He had one really good game and another very good or good game. But in general, Sasha is so inconsistent. And I know people will say, I think he's arrogant. I don't think he's arrogant. I just think he's very young and inexperienced. He's naive in his play. And he's trying to do too much. Because it worked for him in that one game against New Zealand, and it worked very well. People are now watching him and they're marking him. So now these things don't always come off. Yes, he did score a try, but they were down to 12 people, 13 players at the stage when he scored the try. So they had 2 players missing in the back line, and he scores a try. Now, yes, I know that this is a team for the year, so it's based on the year. I agree with you about Tom Curry as well. I think England is just a lot of puff and huff and puff. If you want to talk about arrogant and bullies, talk about England. I would definitely select Savia. I would actually select Savia ahead of Tom Curry and pick Jasper Wiese at number 8. That's another Springbok. At the weekend alone, he had the most carries and in the top 3 of the tackles. Now, a player who carries that much and tackles that much, he's a phenomenal player, and he does all the dirty work, and he allows other players to shine. And I think that's where. So the changes I would make is Jesse at 13. I think there's got to be another fly-off better than that. And in my team, I picked Pollock just because he's more consistent. And the 2 games that he played for me this year, he was very cool and calm, and that's what you need in big games. But then again, Sasha did have that game against New Zealand. And then obviously at number 8, I'll have Wiese, and at number 7, I'll have Savia. And those are the things I will disagree with. At 4, it's a bit. You can pick Nortje at number 4 as well. At number 5 as well. He's a standout in our lineouts. But by and large, it's just other guys' opinion, and we have our own opinions. So, but Eugene, I want to ask you about Curry. I know it's one of those things, but we had that incident with him and Bongi in the World Cup. where he started accusing people. And he started stirring things up. We had another incident with him in the Argentina coach in a tunnel after the game. It's perhaps a symptom of where England is. Like I said, arrogant bullies.
Yeah, I'll go one step back. Let's talk about England, Argentina. England battled to win them. Argentina was very unlucky not to win that game. They could have taken that last line out, scored, and won the game. The interesting thing, after the Ireland game and even after the England game, they claiming to be the best scrimmage team in the world. And that is, they haven't played us, they haven't scrummed against us, but they're already giving us bullets to fire at them. And Curry, I think, is a disgrace to the game. What he did, he tackled very late, didn't get a card. Look, he plays his heart out. I'm not taking that away from the player. He's got influence. He's got a big role in the team to play as well. That was a card. It was a late tackle. I think the guy broke his ankle or something in his leg. And then afterwards, there was a skirmish in the tunnel where apparently, and it's not proven. I didn't see any footage, but he pushed Contemplini, the coach of the Pumas. He pushed him pretty hard. And that's where the argument started. So I cannot see how he can be the dream team just with that behavior. But this stuff happens when there's a lot of emotions. You could actually see when Contemplini was walking down, he was walking to the touch judges on the side and giving them grief because of that. And I know I can, as a coach, I know you have that, you want to do it, but that's not the protocol to do it. You follow the protocol, but. And so this case might have two sides in what happened there. But that's all I have to say about Tom Curry.
Eugene, this is a good opportunity to say congratulations to Malcolm Marx for winning the World Rugby's Player of the Year award. Thoroughly deserved after so many years of good service. I wish him good luck and may he win at least 2 more World Cups.
We'll move on to Wales for now. The Springboks are playing Wales and both teams are completely devoid of their stars, not completely devoid of their stars, but they've lost a number of stars. So Africa, it's almost like a South African A team, although we've still got Etzebeth and those guys there. But we'll see a very different team. And same with Wales. It's almost like a dead rubber. I know it's a money spinner for Wales, but it's not a game I can get excited about.
Yes, Jan, it's actually unfortunate that the URC overlaps with this, that players have to go back to their clubs now and play. It takes a bit of the sting out because Wales played well against New Zealand. They played very well, and I was pretty impressed with them. It was a big score at the end, but they held their ground for a long time. And now there's pride to play for us, the Grand Slam. So I get back to what I always say, if the top players, so-called top players, or first choice players, when they are not picked or they can't play, it gives the opportunity to the youngsters to come in and stake their claim and maybe prove their part. We won't go into this game just thinking, okay, this is the last game, let's get rid of it. We'll go into it, we'll prepare as if we're preparing for a team like Ireland and the French. We'll be well prepared, but so are they. I think Welsh on their side have got a belief problem. And you only get that belief once you start winning games. And I doubt it if they can beat us.
Yeah, I don't think they've got the depth, Eugene. It's a very young team that they'll be facing because a number of the players that did very well against New Zealand is not going to face us. So, yeah, I mean, I'm almost more excited about the restart of the URC, which includes your team, the Lions, traveling to Pretoria to face the Bulls. That's what the main or the first game on Saturday. And both teams, well, the Lions don't have many Springboks, but the Bulls have a number of players still with a Springbok team. The key players like Ruan Nortje, their captain. So that's going to be a very interesting game to see where the two teams are while there's still a number of internationals missing.
The most interesting thing is going to be how they are going to be, how the Boks coming back to the unions are going to be incorporated back into their teams. A guy like Karopis didn't play a lot, so he will want to play. But Nortje, for instance, played a lot and he's silent. I want to come back with you. I missed out on Visa. Visa had a fantastic season now. And Nortje as well. He's the silent, he does his job. It's going to be interesting because those players, young by now, must be pretty naked and tired and fatigued. So it's going to be an interesting process to see how the coaches are going to integrate them back into the competition. Because again, a coach's head is on the block and you need your good players as soon as possible. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how Johan, who's got more Springboks in his group, is going to manage that.
Yeah. I would still make the Bulls favourites, although the Lions are always up for a game against the Bulls. It's always an interesting game because the Lions get going, and if because they have the bulk of one or two, like you say, Krappies is that one guy that hasn't been with the team for a while, but the other guys have been able to train for 3 weeks. So yeah, we'll see when the teams come out. While we're on the Bulls, subject of the Bulls, we know that we just heard the news this week that the Bulls have signed Kade Volater from the Lions. Eugene, to me, that's a bit of a strange one. And we all know Kade has had lots of injury problems. He's never lived up to the promise he showed as a schoolboy. He's constantly being injured. And even at the Lions, he's really struggled at Currie Cup level. I remember that Nkosi, the Lions Currie Cup coach, famously said in the dressing room team that he will never play for him again. So it's strange to me that the Bulls will sign a player like that.
Yes, Jan, I'm pretty sure that Johan Ackerman will not sign a player without doing his homework, doing a full medical, and maybe he just clashed with the Lions. He didn't get a lot of playing time there, and then he got injured. So sometimes these players like him need a lease of life in the rugby life. And I followed him at school. He was brilliant here at Paul Roos. And if Johan and them can bring that brilliance back. And again, I'm going to the word belief. He needs to believe in himself. And then I can understand why they did it. So I don't think it's just getting a player who's in the market. I'm sure they did their homework, and most probably he fits their glove the best for the pattern that they play, because he can run, he can play flat, and he can kick well.
But don't they have enough fly-offs in Pretoria, Luffy?
Jan, there's speculation on social media that Johan Goosen might be hanging up his boots. And then if that is true, then you need to get a solution very quickly, because we're going into a competition. Then it makes sense. And, a fly-off is a pivotal position. So you need a guy, Kade has had a bit of experience now. And I think that's what they see, that they might be able, that he'll be able to go to the next level and play at that level.
So would he be able to dictate a game? I know that Johan Goosen had his injury problems as well. So maybe the Bulls have become the new ambulance job for the certain injured fly-offs.
No, I wouldn't go so far. But a fly can only dictate if his forwards dictate. A lot of people think a scrum half and a fly must always dictate. If you don't get possession on the front foot ball, it's very difficult to dictate. But he's the sort of guy that most probably can pull the rabbit out of the hat. And for me, I really wish, because I've seen a lot of players like Kade that have got all the potential, that don't get back into their groove, push too early, injuries, so they just don't get back to. So I really hope for him and for the Bulls that he's their solution. But I will tell you that if I was a coach out there now at that level, there's a little fly that comes from the Boland, Gilomir, that's playing at the Sharks. I will headhunt him all the way. I think he's going to become a Springbok one day.
The other big game for me, of course, is Munster Stormers on Saturday. So, the Stormers had 3 weeks to prepare. They're going there full guns blazing. I think they'll have a couple of their backline Springboks won't be available. But so Sasha won't play, obviously, and I think Damien might also miss. But the reality is, like you said earlier, those players hadn't trained with those guys. They'll stay there and they might be on the bench. But the Stormers had time to train and prepare with the team they're most likely to start with for 3 weeks. So you'd expect them. And I think the thing that we must emphasize is that these games take place a week before the proper European Cup, the Champions Cup starts. So a lot of these games, the Stormers are going to stay there in Europe, and they go straight on to play the European Cup games there. So they're on a tour at the moment. And the same applies for the Sharks, who are playing Connacht on Saturday. So the players the team will stay there, and then they switch from URC to European Cup to Champions Cup mode almost straight afterwards. So it's going to be interesting how these South African teams cope with traveling so early in December and then starting the European Champions Cup straight afterwards.
Yeah, and I think the Stormers are in a good headspace, because they started off the URC very well. They're on top of it. So I think it's a team with belief. And so I back them to do well on their tour. I think the team that's battling to find their rhythm, composure, momentum is the Sharks. And I feel sorry for them, because they are a good side and they're just not getting that magic done. So Connacht is not your best opposition. So we have a chance, but we really need to turn that thing around now if they want to have an influence on the competition at all.
Yeah, I think the problem for the Sharks is that they're playing Connacht in Galway, and we know what the weather's like in that part of Ireland. So pity the Sharks. I mean, and they don't have the best of fly-offs as it is. So that's going to be a challenge for them. And the weather in general in Europe this time of the year is not the best. So I think that's the problem for the South African teams. It's not that they are.
It's winter, yeah.
Not well.
The Sharks are coming. It's winter there. The Sharks are coming from a humid summer area into the winter. So yeah, the nature has a way to also play a part in these games.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to say. Is that you can prepare for 3 weeks, like you say, in the warm Durban weather, and then suddenly you face the icy winds of Galway. It's not a pleasant place to play. I mean, that wind can blow the ball back at you when you try and kick it. So it's going to be a real challenge for them. But yeah, it'll be an interesting weekend. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the URC, because it'll give us an indication of what to expect in Europe from our teams.
Yes, Jan, I think in closing, I back all the South African teams. I'll always, if we play in South Africa, I'll back the Lions as the old Lion. And I know some of my friends around close to us are Bull supporters. But if any team of South Africa goes abroad, I think the whole nation must just get behind them and give them that support they deserve. It plays a big role for the players as well to know they've got that support.
I agree with you, Gene. I think that's a good note to finish off. Until next week.